All right, Shabbos, say good morning, good Chodesh, everyone. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors still for the month of Shvat, Mrs. Salma Wolf, with immense gratitude for the refuahs from Hashem and the merit of refuah for all of those in need, in the schus of our brave soldiers and Amiras Hashem, and the schus of the return of each of our hostages. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors, the Schwartzbaum family, in memory of, actually it's all Rosh Chodesh Adar, I'm sorry, in memory of Aaron Schwartzbaum, Aaron Yosef Ben Meir Zichron Livracha, and the Ziv Levine Berman families in memory of William Ziv Zev Shmuel Ben Yisrael Zichron Livracha. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Gabi and Shana Cohn, for dedicating the Shin of the yahrzeit of Shana's father, Avi Strimber, Avram Ben Kalman Eliezer Halevi, and Bernard and Varda Birnbaum, creation of the 70th yahrzeit of their grandfather, Shlomo Langerman, Shlomo Ben Chaim Elio, and for the refuah shlim of their brother, Chaim Shlomo Ben Malka. We hope, and of course, we dedicate all of Maseches Bava Kamma Ilui Nishmas, Master Sergeant Elio Michal Charush Hashem Yikom Damo. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamos Lav and Aliyah, the families Ein Nechama, and all of those who need a refuah should have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. But with that, let us begin. A lot to do today, Meretz Hashem, and not a lot of time. So we are picking up today's Daf Tzadik Tes 99. We are picking up at the Mishnah Tzadik Ches Amud Beis 98b. The Mishnah says as follows: Nasan le'umnin letakin v'kilkalo. Interesting case. I give an object to a craftsman in order to fix it, right? Or takin can mean to fix. Letakin can also mean to improve. And what ends up happening? He ruins it. So what's the halacha? Chayav l'shalim. Ultimately, the craftsman is obligated to go ahead and pay. Nasa l'charash shida teif umigdal letakin. I give to a carpenter a wagon, right? A wagon, a closet, a wagon, a basket, or a closet, letakin, to go ahead and fix it. And what happens? Vikilko, and he messed it up. What's the halacha? Chayav l'shalim. Ultimately, again, he is obligated to go ahead and pay. V'abanoi shekibal alav listar. Now, what happens if you have like a builder, right, or a contractor who took upon himself to go ahead, listar sakosel, to go ahead and take down a wall? V'shiber ha'avanim. Now, here's what's interesting. Apparently, in wall deconstruction in Talmudic times, remember, a wall was made of stones. The idea is when you're taking down the wall, you still want to be able to salvage the stones, so you can use it to rebuild. So in this case over here, you're taking down the wall. It's such a beautiful metaphor that sometimes in life you have to deconstruct things, but there are still things even in the deconstruction which could be valuable ultimately for reconstruction. Incredible yesod in the way we look at ourselves as well. I have to deconstruct certain behaviors, deconstruct certain midos, but there are elements of me in those behaviors, in those midos that are positive, that could be used for good, and I have to keep those stones and use it for reconstruction. In any event, he's deconstructing the wall and ends up damaging stones. Chayav l'shalim. Ultimately, again, he's obligated to pay. Haya soser mitzad zev and nafal mitzad acher. This is an interesting case. What happens if the contractor was going ahead and deconstructing the wall on one end, and the wall fell down the other end? Right, the wall fell over. Then what's the halacha? Pater. Ultimately, again, he is pater. But ultimately, if it fell down as a result of the banging, then he's going to be chayiv. So we'll define the parameters of that case in the Gemara. Amar Ravasi, lo shanu ela shnasan l'charash shida tevo migdal l'na'is ben misamer v'nas ben misamer v'shibron. So we'll say, let's go back to the Mishnah now. So remember again, the Mishnah begins with a principle. The principle is, if you give an object to an uman, to a craftsman, to go ahead and fix it, and ultimately, again, he ends up ruining it, he's chayiv. Okay, but we're going to see that at first glance, when you look at that line, you're like, okay, what is the Mishnah coming to teach me? We'll actually see the important lesson that is coming to be taught in that particular line. But now Rav Asi is coming. So then the Mishnah gave the specific example of giving a shida teva o migdal, which literally means a carriage box or a closet, right? You give it to a carpenter, like a craftsman, and he goes ahead and he breaks it, or v'kilkal, he ruins it, he's chayiv. So now comes along Rav Asi defines the scope. He says, when do we say that the craftsman is chayiv? Lo shana el shnas l'charash shida tevel migdal l'na'etz b'hayin mesamer v'na'etz b'hayin mesamer v'shibran. So we'll say, when is there liability? So an example of liability case would be as follows: I go ahead and I give the carpenter a kli. Right, a finished product. I say, listen, here's what I need. I need a repair. I need you to put a nail in there. Right, and what happens? He puts the nail in there, and what does he do? He breaks it. Right, he cracks it. That's when there's liability. Avol nasan lahem eitzim lasos shida tevel migdav asam and shida tevel migdav shibran pater. But watch this. But if I go to the craftsman, I give him wood. I say, listen, go ahead, take this wood and fashion a shida teva umigdal for me. And then what happens, Rabbi say? And then v'shibran, and then in the course of making it, he breaks it. Then what's the halacha? Pater. Ultimately, again, he's pater. Now, both say, now let's be clear. What does pater mean? What does pater mean? Pater means that he's obviously obligated to pay me back. But what is he obligated to pay me back? He's obligated to pay the value of wood, and not the broken wood, and not the value of a broken kli. I will say, obviously, again, those two values are incredibly different, right? He's obligated to pay me back the value of lumber, but not obligated to pay me back the kli. And I will say, now why is that? My taima, and I will say, this is going to be the central part of our discussion for the next little bit. Rav Asi's statement is my taima, uman kona b'shevach kli. I will say, what's the reason for it? Ultimately, again, an uman, a craftsman, goes ahead and acquires through improving the utensil. So we'll say, this is similar to the concept that we saw before, that when a person steals something, and then ultimately, again, there's a shinui, there's a change in it, the thief acquires the object. So Rav Asi acquires this to a craftsman as well. We'll say, essentially what Rav Asi says is like this. In a general case, I go to a craftsman, I want him to make something for me. I want him to make a closet. So what do? I give him the wood. And now his job is to fashion the wood and to make the closet. Rav Asi says the dynamic is like this. When you give him the wood and he makes the closet, essentially what happens is he acquires the closet. The closet becomes his. Uman kona b'shevach kli. He acquires the closet. When then he comes back to me with the finished product, he's selling his product back to me. The Rav says that's the dynamic. Uman kona b'shevach kli. An uman acquires the utensil when he improves the object. So therefore, again, Rav Asi will say like this. When I both say, normally you'll say to yourself, okay, like what is it? What exactly does it? What exactly doesn't matter? So it matters in a case like this, where halacha l'maisa. So Rav Asi says like this: if I go ahead and I give the uman a finished product and I tell him, please put a nail in there, and he goes in and he breaks it, he's going to be liable for complete damages of the kli. Conversely, if I give him wood and I say to him, make for me a kli, and he ends up breaking, he makes it and then he breaks it, he's not going to be chayiv the value of the kli. Instead, what he's going to be chayiv is what? The value of the wood. The value of the wood. Why? Because uman kona b'shevach kli. When you give an uman raw material, or for that matter, again, an unfinished product, and he finishes it, he acquires the object. When he gives it back to me, he's effectively selling it back to me. Incredible idea. So we'll say, let's analyze this. Tanan. So the Mishnah said, if you give to a craftsman and ultimately he ruins it, he's chayiv to pay. So my love, do you have who eats him? So we'll say, are we not talking about a case where you gave the craftsman wood, and yet again the Mishnah is still saying that he's liable for the price of the kli or the value of the kli? Lo, shida tevel migdal. No. The case over there was where you actually gave the craftsman a finished product. You asked him to improve it. He broke it. That's when he's liable for the kli. So the Gemara says, 1 second, but yet the Seifa of the Mishnah spoke explicitly about where you're giving him a finished product. I can infer from that the opening line of the Mishnah is not talking about where you're giving him a kli, but rather the opening line of the Mishnah is where you're giving him wood. Right? And halacha l'maisa, he is going ahead and he's going ahead and I'm giving him wood. To which the Gemara says, Amri, Perusha Kamafarish. Ultimately, the Mishnah is explaining itself. How so? Kate say really the opening line of the Mishnah that says Nasan Omnin Latakim Kilkolo is talking about ultimately where you gave him a kli. So the Gemara says, then it says Kate said Nasan Omnin Latakim Kilkolo Chayav L'Shalim. What's the case of where you give something to an uman? He ruins it, that he's chayiv to pay the value of the kli. When is that? Kigon Shenasnu L'Charash Shida Teva Umigdal. So I'll say, and then the Mishnah explains what's the case. What's the case where if the uman ruins something, he's chayiv to pay the value of the kli? That's when what? That's when you gave him a kli. You gave him a kli, you asked him to improve the kli, and ultimately he breaks it. That's when there is kli liability. However, if halacha l'maisa, you were to give him lumber, tell him to make a kli, he makes the kli, then he ruins it, halacha l'maisa, he's only chayiv for the value of the lumber, not the value of the kli. Hachanam Mistabra, the Gemara says this seems to be clear. I'm sorry. This seems to be clear. The Ketzad Katani, because the Mishnah itself uses lashon of Ketzad. All right. The Isar Light Charesha adds Aitzim, because if you think that the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about where he gave him wood, Hashta Ashma'inan Aitzim Chayavim L'Shalim, V'lo Amrinan Uman Kona B'Shavach Kelim. Because also if the Mishnah is going to teach me that halacha l'maisa, if you just give the uman wood to fashion a kli, and then he messes it up, that he's going to be chayiv for the value of the kli, which tells you that uman lo kana b'shevach kelim shida tevo migdal mibai, then do you need to even mention the case of where you're giving him a finished kli and he messes it up? To which the Gemara says, no. Imishum ha lo area. If that's what you're talking about, if that's your raya, that's not a good raya. I'll tell you why. Tana seifa ligiluye reisha. We'll say sometimes again the Mishnah will mention a case in the seifa to go ahead and bring forth a point in the reisha. Why? Shelo toma reisha shida teva umigdal aval itzim lo. Don't think that ultimately again in the reisha we're only talking about a kli, but if he gave him lumber he wouldn't be chayiv. Tana seifa shida teva umigdal michlal the reisha itzim. Therefore again the seifa mentions shida teva umigdal to infer from here that the reisha is talking about what vafilu hachi, and even though he's only giving him lumber, ultimately, again, if he ruins the kli, chayiv l'shalim. Ultimately, again, he's chayiv to pay. So fine. So we'll say, so bottom line, what do we have over here? What we have over here is a dramatic statement by Rav Asi, uman kona b'shevach kli. An uman, a craftsman, acquires the object when he improves it. So both say, so just understand what this means, just logistically or dynamically. I give an uman wood. I say, uman, make a closet for me. The uman takes the wood, fashions it into a closet. What happens in halacha? The uman is now the owner of the utensil, of the closet. Now when the job is done, what happens? He comes, and what is he doing? He's selling the closet back to me. And I both say, just understand, according to Ravasi, if there's logical extension, what does this sound like? Let's say at the end of the job, the uman says, you know what? That is one nice closet. That is one nice closet. It would look great. It would look great, in my bedroom. And he decides he wants to keep it. Can he keep it? Can he keep it? Yeah. What does he have to do? He has to pay back the value of the wood. So I both say, so this is pretty big. This is like a big idea over here. Uman kona b'shevach kli. Incredible. So let's out. And obviously, this is a machlokes. Right? We're going to see this. I want to give you coming attractions. This is a machlokes, and the other school of thought is that no, uman is not going to be shevach kli. Right? Ultimately, again, everything belongs to the owner of the lumber. Right? And therefore, at the end of the process, if the uman says, "I love that closet, I'm keeping it," we're saying, "No, you're not. No, you're not. You have to go ahead and deliver the good you were contracted to build." So again, we haven't seen the other side of this machlokes, but it's there. So let's bring the following proof to Rav Asi, Hanosin Semer Latzava. So once you give wool to the dyer, tab of Tzadik test 99a, Vikdicho Yora, and ultimately again it's burned in the pot. Right? Rashi says in his Kalkelat Sava Me'atzmo. So the wool is burned, and therefore as a result, obviously the dyeing process doesn't work out. What's talacha? No sein lo demate samro. So Rabbi said this is interesting. What do you have to give? What does the dyer have to pay back? He has to pay back the value of the wool. Now interesting, demate samro ushvacho lo. he has to pay back the value of the wool, but not any additional appreciation. So we'll say, the Gemara says, Lav, shekdicho la'achar nefila. Now we'll say, are we not talking about where the wool got burned after, ultimately again it fell into the pot, which Rabbi would essentially mean was, the wool was improved, there was some level of improvement, and then afterwards, ultimately it was burned. Di'ika shvacha, so there was improvement. Ushmamina, Rabbi say, what do you see from here? Ushmamina, uman kona b'shevach kli. Rabbi you can see from here that ultimately an uman acquires the object through improvement. Amar Shmuel, no. What's the case over here? No. The case over here, Rabbi is where the wool was burned immediately upon falling into the vat. So therefore, again, there was really no improvement. The leka shvacha, there was no improvement. I say, so what happens if the wool fell in? There was a dyeing process, so the wool was improved, and then afterwards it was burnt. So the Gemara says, "Mai no sin lo demeit samra ushavacho." Ultimately, again, he would have paid him back the value of the wool and any appreciation. So lema Shmuel les le Dravasi. So I must say Shmuel does not hold the Dravasi. I must say here it is. So maybe Shmuel holds that ein uman kona b'shevach kli, that a uman does not acquire an object ultimately again through improvement. No. What's the case over here? Kigon ditsemer v'samonin de balabayis. The case here was like could be that ultimately we're talking about a case where the wool and the dye belonged to the balabas. Let's say Ruvain, right? Ruvain owns the wool and the dye, and he was going to shimon the dyer. V'tzava agar yadehu d'shakil. This was a case, we'll say, where to begin with, the tzara, the dyer, had just a defined wage for the activity. So we'll say, apparently, the normal case is where when you go to dye wool, right? Who owns the dye? Who owns the dye? The dyer. The dyer, but Shmuel is saying this is a different kind of case where ultimately, again, the dyer was being hired for a very specific. Again, it was like not a rental is the wrong word, but there was a specific agency, a specific hire over here where he didn't own the dye. Okay, if that's the case, no sein lo demeit samro v'samonimi baile. If that's the case, I'll say, then what? Then ultimately, again, then Shimon, the dyer, should be obligated to compensate Ruvain ultimately again both for the value of the lost wool as well as for what? The value of the lost dye. There should be liability for both of those things. Ella Shmuel dachuya kamatchile. Rather, again, I will say, let's not read too much into this. Shmuel was really just trying to deflect the proof to Ravasi. Okay, so Tashma. Hanosein talisa uman. So I'll say, listen to this. I give my cloak to an uman. Gamro v'hodio afilu mikan v'adasayam ino over mishum bal talin lo talin. So I'll say, now listen to this case. Just switching gears for just a moment over here. Right? I go ahead and I give my cloak, I give my talis, my cloak, to Ruvain to fix it. Okay, Ruvain fixes it. And Ruvain tells me that halacha l'maisa, the job is finished. And what happens? I don't pick up the cloak. I will say, now there is a halacha that when someone performs a service for you, you are supposed to provide timely payment. Right? So let's say again over here, Ruvain told me the cloak was finished. I didn't pick it up. Right? There is a biblical prohibition about say that if halacha l'maisa someone goes ahead and provides you with a service, do not delay payment. In this case over here, what the Gemara is trying to highlight is, even though the job is finished, because I didn't pick it up, ultimately again there is no chiyuv, there is no liability for delayed payment. Apparently, the clock for payment only begins when ultimately again the object is returned. Okay, so the Gemara says now conversely, nasna lo b'chatzi hayom kevan sheshaka alav hachama over lo mishum bal talin. Let's say conversely, watch this. Let's say Ruvain Ruvain does the job. He gives me back the cloak Friday afternoon. Right? Well, it's Thursday afternoon. But let's say what happens as soon as Thursday night comes, I am in violation of bal talin. Right? In other words, I will say the halacha is when someone provides a service for you, you are supposed to pay that day. Now, obviously, I will say this doesn't take into account if people stipulate separately, right? In other words, if I'm contracting Ruvain for a service and Ruvain says I have 30 days to pay, okay, so I have 30 days to pay. In the absence of a stipulation, the Torah says pay for the service same day. And if you don't pay same day, you are in violation of the love of Baltalin, of holding on to someone's wages. So watch this, I will say. So this is so fascinating. So I give my cloak to Ruvain. If right, he tells me on Monday that it's finished, I come and pick it up on Friday. So again, I'm not in violation of Baltalin, right? But if he gives me back the cloak, he returns the object to me, and I don't pay that same day, let's say he gives it to me, Thursday afternoon. By Thursday night, I'm in violation of Baltalin. Okay, now watch this. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. Am I over Mishum Baltalin? Ravasi, if you are correct, watch this. Ravasi, if you are correct, and Uman Kona B'Shevach Kli, which means what? When the craftsman improves something, who owns the object? Who owns the object? Craftsman. So therefore, when the object is finished, even when he gives it back to me, why is there Baltalin? Baltalin is a din in withholding wages. If you hold that a uman acquires the object when he improves it, then Rabbi say this isn't a wage case. What is this? What is this? What is this? It's a sale. It's a sale. When it comes to a sale is not subject, ultimately, again, you could have thrown any transaction into that question, I know, right? And so right with the sale, there is no Baltalin, right? Baltalin is only a din in wages. Baltalin is not a din in sale. So you hear this? If Ravasi, you're right, that Uman Kona B'Shevach Kli, that a Uman literally acquires the object and he improves it, that means when Reuven improves my cloak, he owns it. He owns it. Now he's selling it back to me. So again, if I delay payment in that, that's not Baltalin. So what's going on over here? To which the Gemara says, Amra Mari Braid Rav Kahana. What's the case over here? Begarda de Sarbala, Deleka Shvacha. The case here, Rabbi says, I'm giving him a cloak, and what is he doing? He's softening the fabric. So Rabbi says, softening the fabric is not really considered to be an improvement. So Rabbi says, so essentially, the Gemara is answering over here is, I'm giving him my cloak, and he's performing a service, but the service itself is not really deemed an improvement in the item. Because it's not deemed an improvement, therefore what? Even according to Ravasi, the Uman doesn't acquire it, and therefore, this is a case of a wage case. Sof, lama yavanahili. So I'll say at the end of the day, still, what am I paying him for? I'm paying him to soften it. How can you say it's not an improvement? In other words, if I am asking him to do something, obviously whatever it is that he's doing ultimately is considered to be an improvement in the utensil. If it's an improvement, and Ravasi is correct, then ultimately craftsmen should acquire it. To which the Gemara says, ultimately again, the agre levitchi, bitcha b'ma'asad hainu schirus. So I'll say, no, the Gemara answers, what am I hiring him to do? So I'll say, literally again, this is stick. I'm hiring him to stamp the wool. Look at Rashi, livatushe. Rashi says, v'sachro lidarka, vehisna imo siku madrishos kodricha. So I'll say, I'm hiring him to stamp the wool. So apparently, again, to flatten out the wool, to whatever it is, this is something I will say where halacha l'maisa, this is a service, not an improvement. Service, not an improvement. Therefore, again, I will say this is a case of wages, and because it's a case of wages, therefore, again, there's Baltalin, but it's really not part of the conversation of Ravasi, because halacha l'maisa there's no shebach. Okay, and therefore, again, his wages are commensurate with every time he stamps the item. All right, ulamai desalakadaitin me karadolo agre levitchi. So I'll say, but according to the way we originally thought this up, where I wasn't hiring him specifically again to stamp the cloak. So ultimately, again, this would seem to support the position of Rav Sheshes. The Baimer Rav Sheshes, because ultimately the answer of Rav Sheshes, the following Shaila, Kablanos over Mishum Baltalin, or Ein over. Now we'll say, now here's what's interesting. Remember, in the world of employment, there's different forms of employment, right? There's what's called, we'll call it just like a typical hired employee, which is that, remember, you're receiving an hourly wage, or for that matter, again, a daily wage, right? So that's the typical case. And if the employer does not pay his employee at the end of the day, right, then halacha l'maisa is over in Baltalin. There's also something called kablanos, right? What's a kablan? A kablan is someone who's hired to do a job, and ultimately he's paid for the job. How long the job takes or how short the job takes, that's not really part of the inyan over here. Now again, there still could be a time element that's attached to it, but the idea over here is that the wage is for the job being performed. So we'll see, here's what's interesting. Of course, everyone agrees that there is baltalin for someone who receives an hourly wage or a daily wage, right? If at the end of the day, halacha l'maisa, you don't go ahead and pay your employee on time by the day or whatever the stipulated amount is, halacha l'maisa, you chayiv. You chayiv. What about a kablan? What about a kablan? Ultimately, again, is there liability for not paying a kablan on time? So the Gemara says, listen to this. Rav Sheshes over. Rav Sheshes says, yes, you are in violation. You are in violation. Lema de Rav Sheshes pligi de Rav Asi. So we'll say, bepashtos, Rav Sheshes should be arguing on Rav Asi. How so? So the Gemara says, we'll say, what's the nature of the machlokes? Take a look at Rashi just a moment. Lema pligi de Rav Sheshes de Rav Asi. Midika Amar over. We'll say, now since Rav Sheshes says, now we'll say, now obviously, just to point out over here, in Rav Asi's model, it's going to be, you're going to be not hard pressed, but it's more complicated to find the case of baltalin, right? So baltalin only happens in a case where a person is working on an object that he's not improving, right? But if halacha l'maisa, he improves the object, then what? Uman kona b'shevach kli. Ultimately, the craftsman acquires the object. He acquires the object, and he sells it back to the owner at the end of the process, which means that this is no longer a baltalin situation. So now comes along Rav Sheshes. Rav Sheshes says that halacha l'maisa, you are in violation of baltalin, even for a kabla. So the Gemara says, let's say that Rav Sheshes is arguing on Rav Asi. Now again, look at that Rashi. Midika Amar over, since Rav Sheshes holds that you're in violation of baltalin even by a kablon, even by a contractor, so he says, Kasavra ein uman kono b'shevach kli. V'lo zvinininu, v'kevan de lo kani b'shivcha, heicha dinasan lo itzim lasos men teva, v'asa mehen, v'asa v'shibra m'shalim teva. So we'll say, now watch this. A kablan is certainly a situation where what are you doing, right? What's the typical case of a kablan? Today's kablan could be, I give Ruvain wood. I say, Ruvain, make me a closet. That's a kablan case. Now both say, Rav Sheshes holds that you're in violation of baltalin for a kablan, which clearly indicates that what? That according to Rav Sheshes, a kablan does not acquire the kli. Kablan does not, remember again, just understand the relationship between those things. When are you in violation of baltalin? If you owe someone a wage. If you owe someone a wage, it means who is the owner of the finished product? Who's the owner of the finished product? Me, right? Me, the person who hired the worker. According to Rav Asi, if you owed uman kona b'shevach kli, then what happens over here is when the craftsman changes or improves the object, he acquires it. Which then means when his work is finished, what's happening over here is not a wage issue. It's not that I owe him wages. What is he doing? He's selling me back a utensil. Well, if he's selling back a utensil, then ultimately, again, this is no longer a wage issue. If it's no longer a wage issue, there's no baltalin. So now coming full circle, the fact that Rav Sheshes just said that you are in violation for baltalin even by a kablan, which means I go over to Reuven and say, Reuven, here's the wood. Make for me a utensil. Make for me a closet. Right? And now Reuven finishes it, and ultimately, I don't pay him. All right, delay a week and pay him. Sheshes says you're in violation of baltalin. That says that one. Reuven does not own the closet. I own the closet, right? I just have to pay Reuven for his work. So obviously, again, the Gemara says Rav Sheshes is arguing on Rav Asi. So the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel bar Acha b'shlicha di'igarta. So what's the case? Rabbi say, so it could very well, it's interesting. He puts out what kind of kablana. So we're talking about over here? Delivery of a letter. Interesting. So I'm hiring Reuven to go ahead and deliver a letter. Right? I'm giving him, here's the task. The task is not necessarily time bound, but obviously there's no shevach. Right? There's no improvement. So this could be a case of a kablanos where what? Where halacha l'maisa, I could be in violation of baltalin, and he's not necessarily arguing on Rav Asi. All right, very interesting. So the Gemara says there's no shevach. Fine. So let's say this whole thing is a machlokes tanaim. Again, this whole concept of uman kona b'shevach kli. Let's say this whole thing is a machlokes tanaim. How so? Aseli shiraim nizamim v'tabaos v'akalish lecha. Supposed to listen to this case. Rachel comes over to Reuven, and Rachel says to Reuven, make for me jewelry. make for me jewelry, and ultimately, again, I will become mikudeshes to you with the value of the jewelry, right? So let's say again, she tells him, make me a necklace, right? And ultimately, again, I'll become mikudeshes to you with the value of that necklace. Okay, so the Gemara says, Rashi says, Aseli shirin simidin misheli that kadesh lecha b'schar pula sechas. Well, so the case over here is Rachel is giving Reuven the gold. She's giving Reuven the gold. So she says, make for me the necklace, and I'll become mikudeshes to you. Now, what is she becoming mikudeshes to him with? What's the value of the kiddushin? His work. His work, right? So let's say his work is worth $100. So essentially what she's saying is, I'll become mikudeshes to you with the $100 value of your work, right? I owe you money. I'm going to owe you money. You're going to forgive that debt, so to speak, and I'm going to go and become mikudeshes to you with the value of your money. Again, I want to be clear. Not the value of the necklace, right? Why? Because she owns the gold, right? She owns the necklace. So I'll become mikudeshes to you with the value of your work. So what's the halacha? Kevan Shasan Mikudesh Rameir. Rameir says it works. It works, right? Halacha Ma'aseh, it works. The Chum say Eina Mikudeshes Ad Shiagia Mamon Liyada. The Chum say absolutely not. This doesn't work, right? They'll say, why doesn't this work? This doesn't work until money gets to her hand. Right? So in other words, essentially what the Chum is saying is she's not getting anything. Right? Nothing tangible is being given to her, and therefore you cannot affect Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, what's going on over here? My mama, what does it mean when we say she's only Mikudeshes if money gets to her hand? Ilema osa mamon. So we were saying that money itself, in other words, maybe is that a reference to the necklace? So the Gemara said, Michlad Rabbi Meir Savar osa mamon lo. So we'll say, so now, let me take that back. So are we saying that actual money has to get to her hand? So we'll say, does that mean that Rabbi Meir himself holds that you don't need that money? Ella b'may mekadsha. So what is he being mekadisha with? Ella pshita my mamon. What does mamon mean? Mamon acher. So Rabbi say what's happening over here is like this. Rabbi Meir says it works. When ultimately she can become mikudeshes with the value of the service he is performing. The Chum say it does not work. The only way to affect kiddushin is what? Is if he gives her some additional money. Whatever, another pruta. The savrua, so we'll say, now watch this. There's a lot being thrown at us today. This savrua, the Gemara says, the truth is, the savrua, the kuli alma, yeshna l'schiros mitchila vad sof. So we'll say, now watch this. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff involved in this case. So we'll say, if you remember again, we had this machlokes before, of yeshna l'schiros mitchila vad sof. Now we'll say, what does that mean? When you hire someone to do a job, how do we view their wage? Do we view it that their wage is accrued every step of the way? So let's say like this. So Rachel hires Reuven to go ahead and make a necklace for her. So how do we view that? So do we say, you know what, this hour Reuven earned, $25. And the next hour he earned another $25. That's yeshnu l'schiros mitchila va'asof. The money is being accrued over the entire duration of the employment. Or do we say eina l'schiros ela l'basof? No. The money is not accrued over the entire time. Rather, again, what happens? There's a lump sum that's accrued at the end of the process. Rabbi say we're going to see the major nafkamina between that is how, if you hold yeshna l'schiros mitchila va'asof, then Rabbi say the problem is if he's going to be mekadesh her with the value of the service he's performing, that's the equivalent of being mekadesh with a loan. Because we'll say essentially what ends up happening over here is every hour he works, she owes him money. Right? There's an outstanding debt that she owes him. Then I will say, so watch this. So therefore, the Gemara suggests as follows. A lot going on over here. So first of all, let's assume then in an employment arrangement, the employee, the worker, accrues the money owed to him every step of the employment. So that's number one. Furthermore, everyone holds that you can't betroth a woman with a loan. Then I will say, what does that mean? Loan forgiveness does not work for Kiddushin. Right? So in other words, Reuven owes Rachel money, and she says to him, I forgive the debt. Ultimately, again, that's not called Kiddushin. Why? Because the way Chazal set up Kiddushin, ultimately, again, is that the woman has to receive something of tangible benefit. So Mekadesh B'milva, Eina Mekudeshes. I both say, now watch this. So my love, so what are we arguing about over here? So therefore I both say, what's happening over here in this case, Rabbi Meir and the Chachamim? My love, B'uman Kona B'shevach Chli Kamiflagi. So I both say, are they not arguing in Uman Kona B'shevach Chli? Now watch this. The Rabbi Meir is Uman Kona B'shevach Chli. So we'll say, watch this, it's very exciting. So according to Rabbi Meir, when Rachel goes ahead and gives Reuven the gold to make the necklace, and Reuven makes the necklace, then what happens? We'll say, who owns the necklace? Who owns it? Who owns it? Reuven. And therefore, again, when Reuven gives it to her, we got Kiddushin. We got Kiddushin over here, right? On the other hand, Rabbanan Savri, Ein Uman Kona B'Shevach Kli. Well, see, on the other hand, we can say that according to the Rabbanan, they hold, an Uman does not acquire with improvement. And therefore, I will say, the only thing that Reuven could possibly be Mekadesh Rachel with over here in this case is what? Loan forgiveness. Loan forgiveness. And loan forgiveness is not an effective vehicle of Kiddushin. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, here it is. So here it is. Machlokes Tanam, Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanan. So exciting. Tushmer says, no, sorry, lo, Tikuli Alma, in Uman Kom Shavakli. Both in reality, everyone will agree that a craftsman does not acquire ownership of the object when he improves it. So both say, right? So Reuven is not acquiring the necklace. So what's the Machlokes over here? Elahacha. So we'll say here there's a more usualistic machlokes. We'll say Rachel gives Reuven the gold to make into a necklace. Reuven makes it into a necklace. So we'll say, so now let's say it's 1 day of work. It's 1 day of work. So how do we view Reuven's employment? Do we say that every hour Reuven earns a certain amount of the wage? In which case he can't be Makadesher with the value of his work. Why? Because Halacha L'Maisa, that's effectively being Makadesher with a loan. With a loan, right? Because she owes him money for every hour that goes by. Rabbi Meir Savra Eimus Schirus Elabasof. Rabbi Meir holds that's not how it works. Rabbi Meir holds that Halacha L'Maisa. The way it works is you only owe him a lump sum at the end. But it's not called the milva, it's not called the halva, right? And therefore, again, because it's not called the halva, it's not called the loan, therefore he can be mekadesher with that value. For the Rabbanan Savi yesh l'schiras mitchila v'atsof. The Rabbanan hold no. Ultimately, again, a wage is accrued over the duration of the service performed, and therefore halacha l'maaseh is a loan, and you can't be mekadesh a woman with a loan. Okay, so Marz say the other possibility is the choli alma yesh l'schiras mitchila v'atsof. Other possibilities, everyone agrees that halacha l'maaseh, ultimately the wage of the worker is earned over the course of the that the wage is earned over the duration of the job being performed. Oh, Jose, maybe there's a more fundamental machlokes where they're arguing about, can you be mekadesh a woman with loan forgiveness, with debt forgiveness? The Rabbi says, yeah, that's value. That's value. Absolutely, you can. For Rabbanan Savri, Hamakadesh B'milva Eina Mekudeshes. The Rabbanan hold that no, Halacha L'Maaseh, you cannot go ahead and be mekadesh a woman with debt forgiveness. We'll say Amud Beis. Rava says no. Tichuli Alma Yeshne L'Schiras Mitchila V'Atzov. We'll say everyone agrees that Halacha L'Maaseh. We'll say, you see, this is one of these very exciting gemaras because there are so many principles, right? I just want to point out the open principles now that are on the table. Number one, Uman Kona B'Shavach Kli. That's principle number one. Doesn't Uman acquire the object when he improves it? Number one. Number two, Yeshnu l'schiras mitchila b'atzov. How do employment arrangements work? Does the employee essentially accrue a wage every single hour? In which case, again, it's a loan. Or no, ein l'schiras alam b'atzov. Or no, there's only a lump sum at the end. Third open machlokes, mekadesh b'milva. Can you go ahead and betroth the woman with debt forgiveness, with loan forgiveness? We'll say all of those are open items right now. So Rava says, everyone agrees that halacha l'maaseh. I will say in employment, the way it works is the employee acquires his wage along the employment, and therefore, again, I will say, ultimately, again, the employer owes him his money along the duration of the employment. Furthermore, everyone agrees that halacha l'maaseh, you cannot betroth the woman with loan forgiveness. With the kuli alma Ein uman kona b'shevach kli, and everyone agrees that an uman does not acquire the object when he improves it. Ela chamaskina, rather, what's the case over here? Kegon shehosif la nofach mishalo. Oh, watch how exciting this is. I will say, what's the case? Rachel gave Ruvain gold to make a necklace. Ruvain makes sense. And what does Ruvain do? Ruvain adds in a precious stone. He adds in a diamond. He adds in a diamond. So I'll say, now watch this. Rabbi Meir Savar Milva Upruta. So I'll say, now watch this. Therefore, when Ruvain gives back the necklace, and he says, Hariat Mikudeshes li benecklace zu. So Rabbi will say, there's two things that he's being Mekadesh with. What are the two things? Number one is debt forgiveness. I'm forgiving the money you owe me. And number two, what else? What else is in there? The stone. The stone. So I'll say now the Shailas Rabbi Meir Savar Milva Upruta Daita Pruta. When a man is Mekadesh woman with both a loan and a pruta, her das is on the pruta. So her das is on the diamond, right? Her das is not on the rest of the necklace. Rabbanan Savari Milva Upruta Daita Amilva. The Rabbanan say no, you're Mekadesh a woman both with a debt, right, loan forgiveness and a diamond. Her das is on the loan forgiveness. Very interesting. Oberplukta dahani tanoi. There was obviously also we're talking about a case over here where Ruvain was not explicit with what instrument he's using for the kiddushin. Right? He gives her back the necklace and he says Hariat mekudeshes li benecklace zu. So now I might say again, there's two pieces over here. There's the loan forgiveness and ultimately there's the diamond. So what's the machlokes Rabbi Meir and the Rabbanon? What's her das on? What's her das on? Is her das on the loan forgiveness, or is her das ultimately again on the diamond? The Sanya, we'll say here it is. Upukta dan tanai. The Sanya bischarsha sisi imech ema mikudeshas. Right? If Reuven says, "Listen, Rachel, I did work for you. I'll become mikudeshes to you or become mikudeshes to me with the value of the work performed." So we'll say, "What's the halacha? Ena mikudeshes." So it's not mikudeshes because that's effectively what? That's effectively being mekadesh with what? With a loan. With a loan. B'schar she'ez seimach. We'll say, what happens if he says, become mekadesh to the work I will do for you, right? He plans on doing work for her. Halacha l'maisa again, he said, become mekadesh with the work I will do. Ultimately, that works. Rabbi Nassan says, b'schar she'ez seimach ena mekudeshes. The chol shekin b'schar she'ez seimach. Rabbi Nassan says no. Rabbi Nassan says he can't even mekadesh her with the value of the work he will do, certainly can't be mekadesh with the value of the work he already did. Rabbi Huda Anasi Omer be'emes amru. Rabbi Huda Anasi said, in reality, they said, bein b'schar she'asi simach, bein b'schar she'asei mach, ena mekudeshes. Rabbi Huda Anasi says like this. In reality, we'll say you can't be mekadesh with the value of work because either way it has the appearance too much of a loan situation. So whether it's work you did do or whether it's work you will do. But if halacha l'maaseh will say there's work to be done, right? Let's say, and the husband adds in, or Reuven adds in some additional piece of his own, then it works. Then it works, we'll say. So again, that would be the case of she gives him the gold to make the necklace, he makes the necklace, he adds in his own jewel, right, into that necklace. That works. That works, right? Why? Because we'll say the assumption in that case is, what is he being mekadesh with? What is he being mekadesh with? The stone and not ultimately the value of the work. I says the Gemara, bein Tanna Kamma Rabbi Nassan. My ika bein Tanna Kamma Rabbi Nassan. So we'll say, what exactly is the difference between the Tanna Kamma's position and Rabbi Nassan's position? Here we go. Ultimately, I will say that nafkamina would be the case of schirus, where you hire someone. So the Gemara says, "Bein Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Huda Nasi ika beinayu milva upruta." So we'll say nafkamina ultimately again in the case of Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Huda Nasi, will be the case ultimately again of where there's a loan with an additional pruta. Amar Shmuel. So we'll say Shmuel says as follows. So we'll say, we just want to point out our original machlokes is still open. Is still open, right? Uman kona b'shavach kli or not, ultimately again that is open. I will say, watch this. Amar Shmuel, just quickly, I wish we had more time. Amar Shmuel, always wish we had more time. Amar Shmuel, tavach uman shekilkel. So I will say, this is a fascinating sugya. What about an expert butcher who literally messes up the shechita? messes up the shechita, right? He just messes it up. So Rabbi say, what's the halacha? Chayiv l'shalim, he's obligated to pay for the loss of the animal. Maziku poshehu nasek, right? Maziku, he's a mazik, he's a damager. Posheh, he's negligent. Nasek ke'omer lo shachat li mikan v'shachat lo mikan. It's as if Rabbi say, it's as if you told him shechts from the neck and he ends up shechting from the tail. In other words, he's negligent. So the Gemara said, "Lamalei l'meimar maziku poshehu." So Rabbi say, all right, you know what? I'll just mention, by the way, Rabbi say, this sugi is going to get into the fascinating idea over here about professional liability. We'll say, what happens when someone's discharging their professional task and they mess up? The boss said, I'll just tell you this outside very quickly. So Chazal in general create essentially professional liability exemptions, right? Why? If you don't do that, then what happens? No one's going to want to go ahead and do their job. So we're going to make a distinction between an expert who messes up versus a layman who messes up. So we'll have to stop over here for today. But don't worry, tomorrow's daf it's not even a daf, right? It's all right. So we have plenty of time to always say, I just want to end off just this idea of uman kona b'shevach kli. He says, when you improve something, that's the Rebbe say, it's Rosh Chodesh. So Shchodesh Adar Aleph Haba Leinu Latova. Rabbi say, when do you truly acquire something according to Rabbi? Only if you do something to improve it. Rabbi say, at the end of the day, when do we really take ownership over ourselves? And when do we really take ownership over our lives? When you do something to qualitatively and quantitatively improve it. If I'm just coasting along and not doing anything dramatic to turn things around, then I'm not the captain of my ship, right? Then I am not the master of my fate. Then I am not truly in charge of life. But uman kona b'shevach kli, right? If I go ahead and I make a shevach, I make an improvement, that's even a small improvement, that's ultimately, again, when I acquire the reins of my existence. It's Rosh Chodesh, Rabbi say, new beginnings. Hashem to have a month of shevach, a month of bracha, a month of growth, a month of improvement, and in that zichus, truly take the reins of life. Shkoyach, Rabbi say. All right, Chavran Zoom, have a great day, everyone. A good Shabbos, a good Chodesh.